It's 3:15 on a Thursday arvo, and I'm on holiday, so I'm having a beer. mm. Well, it's mostly holidays. Mostly holidays. Of all the time I spend on holidays, how much time do I spend still working? Not to mention we will have some events. There are some events. There are some things coming up. Anyway, so this is why I'm doing this at 3:15 on a Thursday arvo, and not the normal like Friday or Saturday. Because as of a few hours from now, we'll be heading to the airport. We're going to two new places I've never been before, which I'm really happy about. Going to Oman. If you're listening to that gun, that's a good idea. Is that a good place to go? Apparently it's awesome. And not only is it awesome, but it's one of the safest places in the world. And it's got all this really cool stuff, so long as you don't go next door to Yemen, which is really bad. So don't go to Yemen, apparently. Who's here? G'day, Jono. Brendan's asking, what's a holiday? Never know my kids. Sometimes it feels like... I don't know the last time I had a holiday where I didn't do work at all. Even like we're in Hamilton Island. When was it? A week ago. Sounds very luxurious. Very recently. And there was a lot of poolside dartering and emailing and things. Anyway, we're going to go to Oman. Never been there before. To go to Oman, we've got to go to Dubai. And it's right next to Oman. So we're going to go to Dubai, get on another plane, go to Oman, go back to Dubai, and actually go outside the airport. I worked out the other day, I think I've been to Dubai 35 times to the airport, but never outside the airport. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. And it seems to be a very polarizing place for a bunch of people like, it's awesome, I love it, it's really cool, there's so much to do and all this interesting stuff. And then a bunch of people like, it was terrible, it's so glitzy and over the top. I feel like I'm going to be more the former because I think it's going to be a little bit like the first time I went to Vegas and I hated it because it was so glitzy and over the top. And the second time I got into it a little bit, and then the third and fourth times I was just like, where's my Lambo? And it was fun then. So that's what I'm hoping for. James, I knew it had to be an Aussie this late. Yeah, well, late, I don't even know. I mean, it's early now in Europe, isn't it? It's for late in the US. Brendan says, majority of the time I find myself unable to stop looking at the work chats. Sample grand final weekend. Yeah, it's a different thing. G'day, Lance. Lance is here. I was trying to figure out what to do today. And I'll tell you how I came up with what I came up with later on. I'm going to do the sponsor thing first. And this, of course, as a sponsor, has just been a very, very long-term, fantastic, not just sponsor, but partner for myself and Have I Been Pwned. And it is 1Password. It feels like it's no introduction by now. 1Password Extended Access Manager, securing all of your things beyond just your passwords. And this is, I guess, the interesting challenge for 1Password now, where it's literally got password in the name, but it's not just all about that. And honestly, some of the most enjoyable times I had this year was hanging out with the 1Password folks in Montreal in Canada. Last month, month before, I don't know. It's becoming a blur. But I think there are amazing things ahead for them, and they're an organization that I know they're a sponsor and they're paying money, but for so many years I paid for the privilege. In fact, I still pay for 1Password. For so many years there was no bilateral relationship. And I just really enjoyed using the product and hanging out with the people. And take that at face value. But good folks, good product. Go and give it a go, if you're not already. Morning, George. Evening, morning. Morning, you're Europe. Okay, I got you now. Late in EST, which would be the eastern side of America. Not so late on the Pacific side, though. So today I was thinking about what to do because last week I did the one with Stefan and that was great. And I got some good suggestions, actually. I had a few emails with people with some ideas. Nothing that's actually solved all their problems, but got some good suggestions. So thanks for sending those through. And I did that. I did a webinar, Scott Helm, this week about PCI DSS was at 4.0.1, like really, really exciting compliance stuff, but some cool stuff that Report Your Eye does to tackle that. So that was good. James loved last week, and thanks, James. I know you chimed in quite a bit there too, which is kind of the point. Like, we want people contributing stuff. And so much of this project, which is now, we're going to hit, oh man, it's about a week away for the 11th birthday. What day is the 4th of December? 6 days. 6 days from now, it is Have I Been Pwned's 11th birthday. Crazy. Anyway, thinking about stuff to do, and I had an email from the EFF, and they were asking if I could write a couple of hundred words about a data breach. And what do they actually say it is? I don't want to like spoil their, so I don't think it's a big surprise, but it's sort of, you get to the end of the year and everyone does all this reflective stuff. Where is it? Is it that one? No, it's not that one. I'd really like to have less emails in my inbox. That would be so nice. Oh, the Data Breach Awards. And they're hoping that I could write up for like a Have I Been Pwned award to summarize what happened with one particular data breach. And I got to think about that when I thought, what should I talk about today? Because you get to the end of the year, everyone gets really reflective. And the data breach that asked me to talk about was Spoutable. And then I thought back to it, I was like, oh, yeah, like that. It's not particularly impactful. Like there are bigger data breaches in numbers and bigger data breaches in terms of the impact on people, but it was just like a continual like, holy shit, they did this and then they did that. I thought that was actually really. What are the other ones that were really interesting? So to make it a nice round clickbaity number, I thought I'd put 5 on there. And we just go through each one of these ones, just recapping some of the highlights. I was going to say something to the effect of my favorite data breaches of the year, but that just sounded really bad. It's like, who are my favorite criminals of the year? Like that's not the goal, but they're just the ones. What did I call it? The top 5 most interesting ones. And of course, this is the top 5 most interesting ones that I've dealt with in Have I Been Pwned. There are many worthy candidates within there. Some of them interesting for different, some of them for interesting for reasons I honestly just can't even talk about because I got so messy. However, let's kick it off. What was interesting about Spoutable? Now, in case you can't remember the situation with Spoutable, this is an alternate social media platform. There are obviously lots of people that went to lots of different platforms because Elon. And one of the interesting things about, why don't I begin with the interesting things with Spoutable? We'll try and be objective. We'll just try and start with the actual raw facts. So Spoutable, a social media platform. You have people that connect with people. People have profiles. People have attributes of profiles. Inevitably, there's going to be some nice async XHR style requests to APIs that return information based on an identifier about the people. And someone had found that there was, let's call it a leaky API that I then phrased as a deluge of data, which I think is fair. Now, I haven't even looked at this again until I just started scrolling through now, but I remember some of the highlights. So going through this, as you started to look at the information which was returned to anyone using the platform, so for all intents and purposes, an unauthenticated API, there was a lot of information in there. So it wasn't just like, okay, I got this, the username, Troy Hunt, the first name, the last name, the about, all the stuff you expect to use publicly. But then it went on, and it also had my email address. I'm like, why would you do that? And the IP address, and my phone number, and my gender. Why would you return that to a rando browsing the website? I think rando is a fair term here. Which is kind of wild. So it was returning that, and you're like, oh, okay, that's really bad. And then you get to the bit called password. Like the API in the JSON response literally had a field called password with a bcrypt hash in it. Now, I immediately assumed that there is no way that would be what it looks like, because that would be ridiculous. Anyway, it was what it looks like. It was exactly what it looks like. And in this blog post, I went through and it's like, here's the bcrypt hash verifier. I used my actual password that I used to sign up. It let me use a password as Spoutable, all okay. So good on them for that. And it matched the bcrypt hash. So I was like, okay, that's really bad. But it's a bcrypt hash. If someone had a decent password, then it would still be like, why would you do it? But still, it's bcrypt, which is good. Some people use good passwords, which is good. So anyway, and then we go on. Because what you could have done, like you're a responsible internet person, and you turn 2FA on all your things, such that if someone does get your password, then they can't use that to get into your things. Some of you know where this is going. in the JSON response were 3 fields that began with 2FA underscore, the secret, when it was enabled, and the backup code. So they were literally returning the secret seed used to generate the 6-digit code. And I sent this seed to Stefan and I was like, hey, mate, can you just see if you can do anything, just so that you're at arm's length, can you do anything with it? And he's like, yep, here's your code. I'm like, sweet. Because, of course, that's the seed that's used to rotate your little 6-digit OTP value. So if you had 2FA enabled and someone could crack your bcrypt password, people got in, which is bad. Really bad. And then it got worse. And they sip a beer for this one. The bit that got worse was there was also a field called EM underscore code. Now, you know how if you've forgotten your password, you go to the website, forgot password, put your email address in, you get sent an email. In that email there's a path and it's like https://website.com/reset password, !, secret token that nobody else knows equals value. That was the value in the API. So you didn't need to crack the password. It didn't matter if they had 2FA turned on even though the secret was there. You could literally just take the code and just reset accounts. And that is why it is a noteworthy data breach, because I have never seen that level of, I'll choose a different word to what I was going to say, but that level of exposing more data than what is intentional. Who's here? Milford Johnson, entrepreneur Jeff Bezos, okay. No, that's internal chat, not relevant. James, why return entire email or phone number to anyone, including the actual account holder? Now, in the wrap-up of all this, the guy running the platform, who does seem to attract some controversy, was not overly happy. Nothing bad happened as far as I'm concerned. He was unhappy, I think, at a lot of people. But it got, so much stuff just got dismissed. But I think the answer, James, as to why you would do that is it's almost like the mass assignment vulnerabilities we used to have back in the early days of things like frameworks that would persist entities from database to app tier to UI. And, you know, you could go into the UI and it allows you to change the password, and you can put a new password in and click submit and it goes and binds it. But if you were to look at that request and actually start to add other parameters, first name, last name, whatever, then those would be populated into the underlying entity because the middle tier persists. Getting a lot techier than I expected to. My reading of this is that they were doing the same thing in reverse. It's just like there is an entity, will return everything back up to the app tier. And we're only going to bind some of them to the UI, but yeah, you look at your dev tools and it's like, oh, that's a lot of data. So anyway, that's what happened. That was Spoutable. That's number one. PC Tattletale is another one of my favorites this year. Now this was one of many spyware/stalkerware apps that got themselves totally hosed this year. And all of these things, MSpy was in there again. There's another one I still haven't loaded because I'm still waiting for something to happen with this. There were 3 that I think that went into Have I Been Pwned and 1 more pending. All of these apps run under the guise of parental controls, monitoring employees, and some of them even go so far, this is, we're in the clean bit of air here, we're the legitimate air. Some of them even go so far as to say consensual tracking of spouses. And apparently there's a thing where I would assume it's a man and his wife, and one of them, maybe one of them doesn't trust the other, maybe it's a good reason, I don't know. But they share effectively spyware with each other so they can watch what the other person's doing the whole time, which sounds like you need a marriage counselor rather than a piece of software. But anyway, that's the clean bit of air. The reality is that they then get abused. Largely, I want to be careful what I say here. I don't think this matters anymore because I'm pretty sure these guys are dead. Are they dead? When I say dead, the product is gone. PC Tattletale, does it still exist? So many of them just completely words. So frequently, they are used for stalking partners, non-consensual stalking partners, because maybe there's a marital dispute or whatever else. Many of us have been there before, I understand. But some people go so far as to install spyware on people's devices. And time after time after time after time, these products are used in that way. And it doesn't matter how much they go, it's just for looking after your kids sort of thing. Actually, MSpy is the example I was thinking of because they had their Zendesk dumped. And in the Zendesk logs, there are all these references from people trying to do non-consensual spying on their spouses. Maybe that should have made the top 5, I don't know. But the thing that got me with PC Tattletale is that they just didn't give a fuck. Like, they totally just outlined it as, yes, look, maybe you don't trust your spouse. Now, I've got this tweet thread here. I'll put this in the comments later on. In fact, I'll drop it in the comments here for people watching on home, and I'll put it in the blog post later. They were very explicit somewhere in here. The guy even had a video somewhere about, oh, here you go. All right. Let's see if that account even exists anymore. It's a YouTube account. Oh, it's still there.
87% of today's youth have witnessed cyberbullying. In over one...
Yep, we won't watch that. But it's still there. I'm going to read what it said here because put it in the tweet thread. In the video for PC Tattletale, they said, in over 1/3 of marriages, one or both partners admit to cheating. This doesn't sound like consensual monitoring. They go on, is your spouse being unfaithful? And then they say, in the video, it's followed by how PC Tattletale secretly makes videos of everything they do and records their every move. Oh, this was the kicker. So the guy who was the founder of this made a video, and I think this one was actually quite old. Let's see if it's still there and if it's got a date in it. It's only like a minute. This was 8 years ago. So anyway, guy's made this video, and in the video he says, maybe you've got a spouse you're worried about. You don't think they're being honest. And then he goes on, he says, it'll show you everything they're doing on the computer. Computer, sounds old. So they were not even trying to hide the fact that the product is used to spy on spouses. Like, it's wild. I can't believe some of the stuff out there that gets away with, I don't know, like still being a business. As I said in here, the brazenness this product promoted to commit egregious privacy violations with is nuts. There's not even an attempt to say we don't encourage it for stalking, not our fault if people do that. How they haven't been binned like SpyPhone is a mystery. Yeah, SpyPhone was one of the ones I got. Also got hosed. All right. What else is in the discussion here? A lot of chatter. Where's the substance, people? Milford Johnson says, if your spouse is so much as reading your FB page for any other reason other than laughing at your memes, it's finished. To move on. No need to get cyber command involved. Yeah, that's probably reasonable. Ryan says, MSpy is very similar to Tracky. Yes, so Tracky was the other one that actually went in because that ended up on DDoS secrets as well, didn't it? Yeah, actually, Ryan, okay, the penny has just dropped on who Ryan is. Yep. Okay. That's in a good way. So it's not, Ryan is fine. So that was kind of wild. That was number 2, wasn't it? That was PC Tattletale. Now, the third one we put in here, combo list posted to Telegram. Now, I hesitated on this because in a way there's combo lists everywhere. Even last week, that's all the blow. Someone was like, okay, here's 1 billion, new list, 1 billion. It's almost like people are aiming for these superlative numbers of how big their list can be. Was it earlier this year that it was like the 20 billion rock you list or some rubbish like that? Anyway, so people keep aiming for these big numbers. The thing that got me with this combo list, and I think the broader observation here is stealer logs, because there was a bunch of combo lists, username, password pairs, cracked from hashes, taken from other data breaches, aggregated, made available as a download. But there were a lot of stealer logs as well. And I feel like this year we've just seen a lot more stealer logs pop up primarily via Telegram. Now, as you remember, Durov has had his his issues this year, found on Telegram, in terms of how accountable they are for information posted there, but there's just a huge amount of cybercrime that is centered around Telegram. And the thing I found fascinating with these stealer logs is that, first of all, this is legit data. A lot of it was fresh, for want of a better term. It hadn't been seen before. And I think the fascinating thing about it is, well, there's many fascinating things. First thing that came to mind is you've got individuals here who've, let's say, downloaded a game cheat. Or I was listening to a Risky Business the other day, and they're saying, one of the things that happens a lot with these is people try to download cracked software. You really want that photoshopped? Just download this executable and run it on your machine. So people do that, runs nasty stuff, captures in your browser the websites that you go to and the information that you enter. So you end up with these sort of website, email address, password combinations on a per user basis. So for one user, you can go, okay, well, this person's used Amazon and that's their login credentials there. And then they've used eBay or whatever, there's credentials there. Now, that's obviously bad for the individuals. The issue that maybe they're like trying to pirate software aside, that's a different discussion. It's obviously bad for them. But I think one of the things that was quite fascinating when I was going through these lists is I had a couple of different organizations pop up and say, look, we've been the subject of account takeover attempts, and the attackers are getting it right first go. Now, when I say getting it right, getting the right email address, right password, if someone was coming along and they had a combo list, a credential stuffing list, email address, password pairs, and they're just trying to see what are all the places people have reused credentials, there's a lot of misses when you do that. But when you have stealer logs, you being the bad guy, you have stealer logs, and you know that on that website, someone with this email address has that password, that's gold because you're in there first go. So a couple of these companies have popped up and said, look, we're seeing this happen. You've just put this into Have I Been Pwned. We've looked at some of our customers that were impacted, and they're in there, and they're the ones that we're seeing people log into first go. Can you help us by, for our website, giving us a list of the email addresses that are in these logs? And that raised a problem. Because the conundrum I was dealing with is, isn't this really a company asking for other people's email addresses? And how do I feel about that? They didn't need the passwords, they just needed the email addresses. And I went backwards and forwards a bit and went, well, if there's enough confidence in the integrity of the data, insofar as if there's enough confidence that these are stealer logs, they were taken from compromised machines, and people were logging onto those websites, then really we're in the middle of the Venn diagram here, right? Where it's like I've got this data with email addresses, but those email addresses are already customers of this company. And I eventually reached the conclusion that just as like a one-off or a two-off in this case, it made sense to provide that data to the organizations just to sort of validate that assumption. And in both cases, they're like, yeah, they're the accounts that we see taken over pretty much instantaneously. Now, that was literally just me providing data to help some companies out. I think there's something much, much bigger we can do here, which is really useful if we can get a constant feed of this data. If I'm honest, I don't even know why it's publicly posted to Telegram. Like, if it's that fresh and it's that valuable, why is it just... No. If you know, send me a message later on. So I think that whole bit about stealer logs in Telegram is an interesting one this year. Now, James says, you don't need to download cracks for malware. MS builds it in Recall. So Recall is the product that got, shall I say, attention. It got a lot of attention earlier this year because I can imagine the meeting at Microsoft's a big place. It's a big place. There's lots of marketing people. Imagine the meeting where someone said, wouldn't it be cool if we just like recorded everything that people do on their PC, and then you could recall that later on. That's how they come up with the name. Clever, right? We could recall that later on. We could use AI and things. So you could be sitting here going, oh, look, who was that person I was speaking to the other day? And wouldn't it be nice just to be able to like enter Cortana or something like that, and it knows that, and it goes in your email and it gets it back out because it's recorded everything. Now, this only went out from memory into preview builds. I think it was on by default and it didn't store stuff encrypted. And then they yoinked it and now it's back in, but there's the option to, I think it's disabled by default. You can enable it and encrypt stuff. I think the nexus here of the really useful stuff versus the privacy stuff is the key. Now, it's going to be different for everyone. It's going to be different if you're in a, let's say I was back at Pfizer and we're working on the secret sauce for the next version of Viagra, right? And there's corporate secrets in there. That company doesn't want it running. I don't want it running when I'm dealing with like Spoutable data or stuff like that on my PC. I think for a lot of other mainstream consumers, they'll be like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. Who knows? We'll see. But also, this is why it was preview too. Like it's, I think the way it sounded pretty dumb, but I also think that it got a bit of a spin on it. And maybe they'll come up with something good. I'd love them to come up with something good, actually. I'd love them to do it in a privacy-centric way. All right. Next one. NPD, National Public Data. Now, this actually was really significant because it leaked the social security numbers of just about everybody in America. Now, we don't have social security numbers here in Australia. We have driver's licenses, as you do in the US, and they're effectively used the same way. And we had our NPD a couple of years ago with the Optus data breach. Optus is our second largest telco. Someone figured out that if you change the number at the end of the URL, you get someone else's data, and they managed to do that however many millions of times, and we had a massive breach. And the thing that was so fascinating about it was the dependency on just the numbers of a driver's license. Like, why do you have to go and change your driver's license? Well, because someone else might take that and impersonate you. And also, why did you keep the driver's license? And why are we verifying with just a number? You know, it's a whole bunch of different issues with that. And I feel like it was a bit similar with the MPD thing, where you've got this company who I believe is now bankrupt or filed for bankruptcy, because it was kind of bad for business. When they siphoned up everyone's social security numbers, personal identifiers, the worst kept secret in America is your SSN, because you're not meant to give it to anyone because it's used to verify your identity, and then you give it to everyone because everyone needs it to verify your identity. So much of this data got leaked. It was in there amongst a whole bunch of other stuff, allegedly from the same source. And what I ended up putting to Heavyweight and Pound, I can't remember actually if I flagged that as unverified, but there was a bunch of other periphery email address information. But I think looking back on it now, and I was in the US for quite some time, not too long after that, and having the discussions with people there about the impact of that, it's just like, it's fascinating, isn't it, that just a mere number, which is almost immutable, it's very, very hard to change a social security number. Just that number is enough to verify. And as I said many times before, it's like cryptographic computer, supercomputer here. Like, I have so many different ways of doing like really, really smart cryptographic things that are with me, not because I'm a cyber guy, but because everybody has these now. It's just fascinating that we're still so dependent on that. If only we all had government IDs that could track us everywhere, it would be so much easier. Don't do that. Well, I don't think people want us to do that. Avidity Recruitment says Optus breach was huge here in Australia. Also had a huge breach with Medibank. Medibank was just after Optus. Optus, whoever did that, we think it's a kid. When I say we, I think the general consensus within the community is it was a kid, because it was a stupidly easy vulnerability where someone then tried to cash in $1 million. They're like, I think they leaked 10,200 of the allegedly about 11 million records. I think they put that on breach forums, and then they're like, could I please have $1 million now? And then they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. And then it went really quiet. Like, someone from the AFP probably went, oh, we know exactly who that is, went and knocked on the door, spoke to his parents, and he went to his room for a very long time. So I think that's probably what happened with Optus. Medibank, of course, we've had attribution back to Russian actors. We've had people named, they're still in Russia, I was going to say like that, but that was when we had the ransomware of our largest healthcare provider, and we had about the same number of people, only a couple of months after Optus, impacted by that, but really actual serious human impact in terms of very, very sensitive personal information. When Medibank data started getting dumped, they started with a list of people that had abortions. Like that was kind of the level these people are operating at. All right. The last one here, it's the most recent one. And I remember where I was when I started dealing with this one. So I remember exactly where I was. I was in San Francisco. I was eating breakfast. This was in there with Charlotte earlier last month. This is the most recent one. And we're sitting there like having our breakfast. And normally what we'll do is we'll take laptops to breakfast. We'll try and smash out what we can over a latte. And I'm reading through this breach that someone sent me, and I'm just like, holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit. She's like, what's going on? So, this is basically a service for people to create AI girlfriends, and it's full of people asking the tool to create child sexual abuse material. And like we're at breakfast, there's no images also, it's just text. So we're at breakfast in a crowded hotel lobby. So I can't tell her what it says. And so I'm turning the laptop around, like, look at this, like, holy shit. Now, we were having breakfast right before meeting with the FBI, which was really, really good time. In fact, it was the SBI and CISA, the Critical Infrastructure Security Agency in the US. And these were just meet and greets, catch-ups. But it was a topic of discussion. Let's say that. That was very convenient. Now, this was a really wild one as well, because I feel there's layers to a breach, right? Like there's just the technical side. Like, what happened? Okay, in their case, I can't remember what happened in their case. They left something open or unprotected or whatever. They had a breach. The data's gone out. But the next layer then is like, well, what happens with the way the organization deals with it? And one of the things that I've really found this year is I feel anecdotally this year has been the worst ever for organizations actually taking responsibility and doing a good job of dealing with their breach. And I've had multiple instances already this year where I've had to deal with corporate lawyers rather than technical people. Sometimes that's worked out okay. I've had a couple of instances where I've had to send it to our lawyers. That's not cheap. So if you've ever used a lawyer before, all right, and you know how they bill in like 6-minute increments, that is not a fun process. And so much has happened this year. Getting a little bit off topic, back to Mart.ai. The organizers of that service, or the operators, I think it was mostly one person, were so adamant as to the lack of impact of it. It's stuff like saying, well, yeah, people don't use their real email address on services like this. Well, what if I join from Mart.ai to email address to the LinkedIn data breach and see how many people have email addresses that they use on LinkedIn that they're also using on their service? Now, maybe they were using Mart.ai because they're lonely and they wanted to generate I was going to say consent. I don't think you can have a consensual AI if you're the one that makes it. An adult-aged AI. And you'd sort of look at that and go, that's a little bit unusual. That's not my thing, but all right, mate, whatever you like. But there was a significant slice of people, and it's very hard to put a number on it. It's very hard to put a number. I was going to say, it's very hard to put a number on like reading through comments about what people wanted to be AI generated and figuring out what percentage of those were CSAM. But I guess an AI could probably do that. It'd have to understand all the nuances of the terms that are used though. So inevitably, a whole bunch of people that were very identifiable. Another layer to these breaches, and as I talk about this, I'm thinking of so many different incidents, including things like the Spoutable one earlier. This is the first example today, where there's also a community around it. The Earth 2 data breach is a good example of that. There is a community that is aware of this incident. Either they knew about it already or they know about it once it goes into Have I Been Pwned. And they're putting pressure on the organization. So you end up with like the technical side of things, how the organization's dealing with it, and the community, which is like, hey, in the case of Mart.ai, a lot of them were like, you can't censor our input. What I have in my head is not illegal. Bytes are not illegal. That's a dumb argument. you know what CSAM images are made out of? Bytes, like ones and zeros. You know, it's like that's a stupid argument. Anywho, so community gets very involved in some of these, and that was the case with the AI thing as well. I honestly don't know how it ended up. I was following the Discord for a while where everyone hung out. And in that Discord, I saw an announcement for the administrators saying, look, we're going to put some guardrails around the things you can request, which seems pretty reasonable. And I saw a lot of outrage. So I almost wonder, a little bit like the spyware stuff, you know, talking about PC Tattletale, but there was also SpyPhone before that, and then there's MSpy, and there's all these other things. Will we now just have a situation where there's going to be so many AI tools which don't put guardrails in place, and that becomes the next frontier, and people go in there with their real IP addresses and their real email addresses, and they ask for things that would be extraordinarily embarrassing for them later on. Whether or not it constitutes illegal material or not is almost beside the point, because imagine you as a I keep saying consent. How do you consent to the AI? I don't know. But you as a legal adult are asking it to generate content, and maybe you're not specifying an age or something, and it's meant to be responsible and make it suitable, but you're asking for it to either generate images or stories or experiences or things like that, and it might tick all of the boxes of being legal, but just like with the Ashley Madison situation, would you want that associated back to you with these deeply private things that you're asking the machine to do? Would you be happy for the parents at school, or your wife, or the church, or all the other places where the Ashley Madison data got posted? Would you be happy with that? I don't know. I think a lot of that's going to be a hard no. Anyway, they were the ones that I found most interesting this year, top 5 in terms of interesting breaches. Next year, there will be a lot more. Like this is the thing that's sort of blowing my mind, where there are endless incidents, and what you see on Have I Been Pwned is just the little tip of the iceberg. It's the stuff that is discovered, circulates publicly, comes to me, is verified, and I feel confident enough to load. And all 5 of those things, there are so many other incidents that don't tick those boxes. And as some of you here know that I've spoken to with breaches before, like going through verification, disclosure, etc., it often weeds out a lot of these things. There's a lot of instances I've been dealing with where I just don't feel confident enough in the authenticity of it, and I haven't been able to get responses from organizations. So that's where a lot of my time goes. Let me look at the comments before I wrap this up and properly go on holidays. Avidity Recruitment says, the Optus kid was definitely grounded. I think that's a fair comment. Milford says, does the AFP come knocking if you go in there to see if your data is in the breach? Genuine question. What are the rules here? Now, when you say if you go in there to see, now I suspect that I don't know if that was in relation to Optus or Medibank. We have spent quite a bit of time with the AFP and their other counterparts around the world, and I think the way I'd look at it is that there's clearly a spectrum in terms of criminal elements, in terms of risk to people's rights and freedoms and everything else. And short of there being things like court orders or injunctions or legal constructs that prohibit the ability for people within the jurisdiction of which they're valid to be able to go and access data, and occasionally we do see that, I don't think the AFP is going to come knocking if you saw either the Optus data or the Medibank data. I certainly saw both. I will openly say that, and I would argue that tens of thousands of people saw both. A lot of it also would come down to what are you doing with it? You know, do you need to have it? Is there, for want of a better term, a legitimate interest? What are you going to do with it? People used things like, remember there was someone, I think it was someone who used the Optus data to send phishing SMSs from like their sister's phone or something dumb like that. So it's one thing to have the data, it's another thing to use it to try and shake people down for money. Now, that said, I, of all people, would like to not encourage the replication of breach data. So I would suggest that if it is not something that you need to have, then don't have it. Chris, wishing you and the family a safe and fun holiday. I messaged you on X with some thoughts based on last week's update with Stefan. Is email preferable? Yeah. Yes, maybe try email, try the contact thing. But look, apologies if I didn't respond. I did get a lot of suggestions for that. And honestly, I joke about it. And I go, Charlotte, what are you going to do this morning? Look, I'm going to go upstairs and delete emails. I'm trying to filter it down to fit everything in the time I have. Milford says, was it the Optus hack? Confirmed some script kiddie, really? I presume it was either mass foreign resources or insider with access left the door ajar. So I have never seen attribution to an individual. And some people may know a little bit, or I'm sure some people know more than me on this. But my understanding is that it was something to the effect of an API that at some point in time had been used and then it had been retired, as in it was no longer used, but had access controls. And at some point the access control got removed. I think it's just one of those things where someone obviously did enough sniffing around to find it. There is certainly no indication, as far as I've seen, that it was nation state or anything like that. It was curious kid, time in the hands, who often said, like, one of the most threatening threat actors out there is curious kids, because they've got time, they're persistent, they're curious. They don't have to go to work tomorrow. They don't have other responsibilities like you and I do. And also, they don't necessarily have that moral compass to know when to stop. I think that's a really major part of it. Yeah, so it was called an unsophisticated attack. Our cybersecurity minister, Claire O'Neill, at the time, since departed that role, was she pushed back very hard on that sophisticated claim, which is good, and she was right about it too. Is there anything more here? Milford says, Troy Duckwick AFP stuff, would it be a good compromise if must check breaches personally to destroy the data as soon as done with it? That would seem fair access. Put it this way. I think if you download any of this, again, short of that, we have had a couple of incidents where there's been court injunctions, which are very firm controls. And I wouldn't go near anything with that, but it is literally only 2 that I can think of in Australia. For everything else, again, I'm not encouraging accessing this or downloading it, but doing so, you're not going to get a knock at the door. Like it's just, in my experience, it's not going to happen. If you did and then you deleted it, I think that would also be a good thing to no longer have it. If you did have, I can understand the curiosity, because often people say, look, I want to know what's out there about me. It's one of the things I'd love to do and have a campaign. I would love to, and I don't think it will ever happen, but I would love to be able to say to people, this is your data. Like, this is what got leaked. This is yours. You should have it. Very often companies who've been breached won't provide it to the victims. I'd love to do that. So I understand the curiosity and I understand why people go looking for it. But getting rid of it, if you do go looking for it, would also be a good first step. Okay, folks, I'm going to call it there. I think I don't know where I'm going to be when I do this next. I don't know if it's Oman or Dubai. We'll see. It'll be somewhere interesting, and I'll have some more stories. There'll be some more cyber stuff, and hopefully I'll be talking about some cool food and culture stuff, and we shall see. Thanks for watching. Catch you in a weekish. See ya.